Performance Lab, and we're gonna test a whole bunch of different tests and metrics to see before and after my training in preparation for a big event that I have coming up. I can't tell you right now, but you guys will know, and it's pretty awesome, so stay tuned.
Let me show you real quick what this scan looks like. I'll show you one of mine so you might get an idea of kind of what it's going to be. Measures of your body comp, volumes, comparisons when you've done a bunch of reports and what's changing. And then you get body comp stats too. So lean fat masses, where muscle tissues lie in, a couple of different health metrics basically.
The more precise the results.
Cool. That's it for number one. You can step right off there. Step onto the scale behind you and log what your weight and also your height is, because we're going to put some height metrics in for a couple of our tests today.
Your weight is 77.65 kilograms. Your height is 176.1
perfect 25
centimeters.
Quite nice.
Your body mass index is 25.0.
Counter movement jump. This is your baby. I don't really think I need to give you too many instructions on what we're doing here.
What's the best metric here, or like what's the highest?
I'm not actually quite sure. I think somewhere in the 30 or 40 inch range, so it's kind of nothing compared to what I'm expecting out of you. I had a couple of warm-up reps myself earlier and I was at like 20 to 22 range. Okay. So I'm kind of expecting I'm going to be embarrassed in a couple of minutes. Let me just sign you in. So we've got some scores logged. We'll do 3 or 4 reps. Whatever you deem as appropriate is going to be probably a better indicator than what I'll deem appropriate. You're going to know how much reps you've got in the legs before you might start to fade and lose a bit of height. Once we hit start here, we are on. Every time you record a jump, it's going to wait for me to accept it before you do another one. When you step on up, there's going to be a couple of green lights just blinking up and down here. Once we see them moving, we know that we're ready to record, and you can go for it with your best form. I don't think I need to cue you on it. Sweet. Ooh, there we go. It's either tied or by 0.1, 0.2 of an inch your best. You've stepped it up a little bit again. That's your greatest flight time for sure. Let's just have a quick glance through the summary here. 9 reps. Pretty impressive stuff, 37.9. We didn't quite crack that 38 we were looking for, but all the same, that's a phenomenal jump. You're quite a bit over you're 2 inches over the 3 feet mark there. And you've also averaged more than 3 feet, even with 9 reps of what is a power movement. This is supposed to get pretty tough pretty quickly. But it was your 7th rep was your best, so good job on that. Phenomenal everything. If we were to go through the whole board, one thing that's notably great is how much, really what I should say is how little asymmetry there is between your 2 legs. There's a couple of reps where you went a little bit left or right side.
I drifted for sure.
But on average, we've come out 0% imbalanced, which is really, really great for someone who, you're a power athlete. You should be pretty well balanced both sides, given what your sport is. If you were, a soccer player, combat sports athlete, you were using a dominant leg, I'd be looking at this with a little bit of a different lens. But for what you're doing, this is awesome.
Maybe that's why on my dunks, I can do the 1 foot off the left foot, 1 foot vertical jump, 48.5 inches, and then I can do my 2 foot where I'm jumping predominantly off of that right and get 50 inches. So maybe that's why, because a lot of people aren't able to jump off of 1 foot and 2 foot and standing. Usually they are one or the other.
Yeah.
They're like really good at 1 foot, but lackluster at 2 foot, and then maybe not as good at standing and whatnot. But something that kind of made me go viral and gain status in the jump athlete industry is the fact that I can kind of do it all those. So maybe that kind of correlates to the fact that it's fairly balanced.
You mentioned 48 inches on a single, but 50 on a double leg jump. I mean, yeah, that's pretty impressive stuff. That's looking like there isn't
all vertex stuff.
There's not a particular lack of power anywhere, is what it sounds like. Have you done a grip squeeze before? Have you played with one of these? Right, a couple of quick quirks with it. There's no malleable parts. There's no spring loading in it, so meter's moving, I'm squeezing, but nothing's changing in my hand. Doesn't look like I'm at much. When we're recording reps, we're aiming for peak force as well as time to peak force. So we don't just want to be strong here, we want to be powerful. So we want to employ that strength quickly.
All right. And you said 1200 was that?
I think somewhere in the 12 to 1300 newtons region, yeah. Yeah, it was quite a way up there. We're doing it with a 90-degree bent elbow, so flexion at the elbow. I'm not going to prompt you into the rep. You're just going to grab the meter, you'll get nice and loose grip on there, 10, 15 or so newtons, and when you're ready, unprompted, you're just going to go for it. A hard and a fast squeeze, up to whatever peak you hit. Once we see a bit of a peak plateau and you're starting to taper away like I am there, we'll relax. We'll take maybe a minute in between each rep and we'll record 3 or 4 from each hand. Go, go, go. Squeeze, 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 Chris, squeeze, Chris, squeeze and relax. Just shy of 800, 784 newtons. We're going to give you a minute break in between each rep. Go, go, go. Squeeze, 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 squeeze. Go, Chris, go, Chris, go, go, go. And relax. I think we found our best. 750. We're just shy of that 800 mark, but I think we're pretty content with that. That's a pretty great score.
Yeah, 784 was the best?
Best one, yeah. For what's in this system, it's 100% all on both left and right sides. A 0.5% asymmetry to the left because it was only the 4 newtons different. But like I said to you, once you get beneath the 1 second mark, you're elite for that time to peak force as well. And then your rate of force development is how much force you're generating in the first 100 milliseconds. Given that this is limited by time, your score here may never improve even if your peak forces rose, because you've got, a couple of seconds to get to that peak force, but not a whole lot of time to change in regard to that one. So pretty impressive. We'll talk about them again when we sit down after. So what we're doing here is an isometric mid-thigh pull. This is a lower body strength test. It is somewhat what grip strength is to the upper body. This is to the lower body. It's going to be performed somewhat like a deadlift, only with somewhat limited range of motion because of this chain you'll have right here. I'll give you a quick demo. You'll be stepping in to a somewhat half squatted position. You'll be going as far as 50 newtons on our meter in front of us for 3 seconds. Once you get that little go beneath the 50 newton mark, then we're going to go into as hard and as fast a pull as we can achieve. Hold for a couple of seconds, and we'll relax once we've hit a bit of a peak or a plateau.
Okay.
We're aiming for 3 or 4 reps again, same as before. Let me have you step in and we'll just get set for the right height. You know the deal here. Everything has been good about your form and performance so far in the warm-up reps. So just let me get your toes an inch or 2 forward. There you go, Chris. You're good at that. Once you get that meter to 50 newtons, it's going to give you a 3-second countdown. You're good at there. 2, 1, and go for it. Pull, 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 and relax. Great job. We've blown off the charts there. We're at a 2800 on our first 100% rep. And we were already in the 2s when we were warming up, so we might be even able to crack the 3s here. Let's give it a minute or 2 and go again. What do you think?
Yeah, let's get that. All right.
Particularly impressive times to peak force here. We're beneath 2 seconds, and in this case, we're not looking at as high a margin or as high a level of performance for the time to peak force.
Okay.
Just because we're pulling a whole lot of force.
Yeah.
We're getting 800-900 on the hands, but we're getting 2,000-3,000 on this, so it takes a bit of time to get there. Let me check. It's hilarious. This test, no more than people are pretty poor on the Proteus. Mm-hmm. People are so new to this and so unfamiliar with the performance that most of the testing we do for this is really just introduction to the performance.
For this one?
Yeah, and the
Really?
second or third time someone does this, they might actually start to get scores that are representative of what their power actually is.
Yeah, it's a big
because they've figured out the correct form and technique.
Yeah,
they're no
bracing,
longer worried or
coordination.
concerned about hurting themselves. And then they start to really see results improve because of training sessions and not just because of the rapid learning curve.
Yeah.
All that is to say, most people's scores have been horrible percentile-wise, but that, 2803? Well, the 75th percentile mark for men, and this is without an age grading, is 2781. You're 30 newtons above that, or 23 newtons above it. So you're about the 78th, 79th percentile, which is pretty good given it's your first rep, and we might see a little bit of an increase again for the second or third. Let's just make the screen ready for you. Whenever you're set, let's go for it. Pull, 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 pull. Go, 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 go. A little bit of a squeeze further. Another 40 newtons.
Yeah.
2840.
Okay.
Slightest bit slower. And while it's very impressive, I would guess that we might be getting close to finding our peak. Another rep or 2, we might be there on this one.
Yeah, for sure.
Last rep, best rep. Go for it. Pull, 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 pull. Go, 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 go. And relax. And what do we get? Oh, not quite there. I mean, it's pretty damn impressive. It's more than double what my bests are. But we're back into the 2700s. I think we can call it a day on our isometric mid-thigh pull. And you have, with certainty, set our location record. So good job on that.
Thank you.
By somewhere in the region of about 400 newtons, possibly even 450 newtons, I'd have to check. But I'd be happy if I was you. That's pretty damn good. Tell me, Chris, what do you know about VO2 Max? Do you know a little bit about what we're going into, or are you blind?
I did a tiny bit of research, but definitely give me the professional overview.
Perfect. This is going to be somewhat of a cruel description, but we're going to spend about 20 minutes on the treadmills here, maybe 25, because I know you're going to be quite fit, and there's no required number of minutes. I'll just need you to run for as long as you can. But I'm going to try and make it difficult enough for you to quit. I'm trying to find the point at which you're exhausted so much that you're not going to be able to continue the test. Take that in the nicest way possible. That is the purpose and the premise of this test.
Absolutely.
What we'll find out from that will be how much oxygen you're able to, well, I won't say efficiently somewhat, because you're going to be working under a lot of stress at that end point, but when you're under that stress, how much oxygen you can efficiently deliver to your working muscle groups to continue that performance. More oxygen delivery is going to mean maybe being able to hold on to a bit of a lower heartbeat for a few minutes while you're working hard, dumping less lactic acid into whatever is working, in your case, them flying legs, I guess. And that's where your performance is going to sustain while you're not producing the lactic acid, and then suffer when you do start to pump it in there. We're going to find out a lot about that today.
Okay.
Protocols themselves will be 5 minutes of a walk at the beginning. We're just going to make sure that once we put the mask on and you're wearing a heart rate monitor as well, you're comfortable with the equipment. Provided you are, and I'm seeing good stats down here, I'm seeing everything is relatively normal for someone who's just walking, then we'll start to move you up every minute after that 5 minute walk until we get as far as a speed that you can't run it anymore or you have to quit from. If there's a point at which the speed becomes a bit of a danger element, I don't want you to have to quit because it's moving too fast, then we'll add incline. But I heard you mention earlier, when you're doing your intervals, you're moving up as far as like 11 and 12 miles an hour.
Yeah, I mean, but that's not sustained for long periods of time.
Of course, yeah. But one thing I like to drive home for people with this test is, particularly given your sport and the context that you're here with today, is while you will be running, it's not a running test, it's a fitness test. So for someone who is a better or a faster runner, it's going to be easier to exert themselves maximally and get high scores on this. Yeah. But sometimes people are really, really fit, they get exceptionally high VO2 max scores, but when we get up to that final intensity that actually brings them to maximum, they sustain it for like 3 seconds. Yeah. It's not weird that I put the final bit of speed on or final incline and just like a 0.5% over the edge is enough. It's kind of the straw that breaks the camel's back, so to speak. So all that said, when we get towards the final 2 or 3 minutes, it's going to seem very much like an interval for you. Embrace the suck. Embrace how much your breathing is going to become difficult. It'll be a little bit sweaty inside of the mask. No one is going to enjoy it, I'll tell you that much. I can promise it's no one's favourite thing in the world, but it's only going to suck for about 2 or 3 minutes. Yes, that is, there's 3 rules in here. We can only tell them to bridge up your nose a little bit. This will help it come up. 5 minutes, but in reality, once we hit the 3 or 4 minute mark, if I can see that everything in regards to heart rate and VO2 look good and looking for, or range, so much as it is just whatever numbers. Mask is fine for breathing.
Yeah, fine.
Cool. We've got live VO2 scoring, somewhere in the high 30s at the moment. You'll see it changes kind of breath by breath. Our fraction of oxygen expired is determining how much oxygen is being absorbed right now. So the lower this number is, the better, because when less is expired, more is absorbed. So in Christopher's case, he's absorbing just over 84% of what's available to him right now. He's breathing just over 20 breaths per minute, so he's not under too much pressure yet. We've still got a good controlled level of breathing. We're going to stick another 0.5 mile an hour pace on now and see what it does to performance. We're probably getting to the region of 22 or 24 breaths per minute pretty soon. I'm going to add a bit of incline and see if I can get you any higher. I can tell you're struggling, so if we don't see anything much more, we'll call it quits. We're done, we're good. I can tell you're spent there. Step right off the side, I'll get that mask off you in a second. Feeling good? Or as good as can be at least? Great, good job buddy, well done. You've got somewhere in the regions of about a 56 to 57 score, which is awesome. There's lots of signs here that your jumping is better than your running, but that's quite relatively speaking. If you were to come in here and do nothing else and you scored a 57 VO2 max test, I'd be saying, off you go into the distance, you're doing great, keep up the great work. For what you're doing, let's get working, let's get this needle moving. It's quite high, it's going to be hard to find the 1%, but there's room for growth always. Okay. Good job, well done.
So you were seeing like lack of efficiency?
Yeah, I'm seeing 2 things really. Well, kind of 3. Your heart rate had already plateaued quite a bit. It did get as high as 201 or 202, but the last 5 or 6 beats that we found were very, very slow. Your VO2 score, this blue line, had entirely plateaued, and for the final moments of that plateau, your frequency of breathing, this RF, or your blue line, really jumped up. You were breathing about 45 or 50 breaths per minute, so quick that you were going to start to actually absorb less oxygen. The air is not in the lungs for long enough, and as a result, we're not going to get any higher on our VO2 max. When your air is starting to kind of seep out of the lungs without getting brought into the bloodstream, you're just going to dump lactic acid into the legs. I could see you kind of drifting back a little bit on the treadmill. You were gone a bit silent. You're supposed to be suffering. It's not a wrong thing, but I could tell we were right there.
When I run the mile, I would say I feel that way.
I'm going to get you walking real slowly, by the way, just for another 2 or 3 minutes while the heart rate comes down.
My calf and hamstring is about to cramp up, so I could use some salt.
I'll grab you some.
But usually when I get to lap 3, that's how that felt.
Yeah.
And then, so I just suffer through like the last lap and a half at that pace right there.
Yeah, I can see that. That's where the mile is a great test for anyone. It's like there's no escaping or hiding from anything in there. You know, at a 400, it's never going to be easy, but you can saunter around, and it's going to suck for, you know, a minute to 90 seconds for a good runner that gets it done in that time. But
so what do you
it's only that distance. You know, the mile and 400s are a killer when you got to do more than one.
Yeah, for sure. What do you recommend to improve my VO2 max to be able to sustain that level without that diminishing returns kicking in? Like, how can I prolong that?
Something that you already mentioned you're actually doing already, I think is going to be the most effective training. But what we'll chat about when we finish with the recording in a minute or two is going to be your heart rate zones and maybe adjusting the intensities you've been working a bit at. Because you mentioned already you've been doing some good runs in zone 2. You mentioned, I think, 6 miles or so.
6 miles at like
10
a level
or 11
10
minute
speed
miles.
right there. And I feel like, so I'm doing that 60 minutes.
And you also mentioned that you're doing some interval training and some sprint work, which also as a power athlete I know is
the
kind of
sprint
your
work,
history
but I've been
as
doing
well.
more. I find that my muscle endurance is my second biggest thing that I need to work on.
Yeah.
Especially because power athlete is like a spectrum. Sprinting and max jumping, that takes 0 to 6 seconds each, and then you get a rest. That's like football. I'm a football player.
Yeah, 6, 7 seconds of a
sled pushes for, let's say, 10 sled pushes of like 25 yards. That kicks my ass. With like, you know, 245-pound plates on the sled, that really kicks my ass, and my legs just feel completely exhausted. So I need to work on my muscular endurance as well.
Given we don't know exactly the competitive nature, like the competitions in particular you'll be competing in, and given your strong suits versus what we can kind of identify in this test result, I think you'll be doing your zone 2 stuff continually. We might be adjusting maybe the heart rates and the intensities you're doing at that, depending on what we see here in a minute or two.
Yeah.
But for those speed work and those interval training sessions where you're mentioning things like a 25-yard sled push, you'll be doing stuff similar to that, but I'd be thinking about like the running side of your cardio training intensity-wise. It's going to become much more elongated, but low, not easy intervals or reps, but lower intensity relative to what like anything less than a 400 would be.
Building the base rather than just always trying to push it to 100% max, spend more time in
Yeah,
zone 2.
I'd be thinking the likes of, you mentioned, I think, is that every month you're doing the mile?
No, once a week.
Oh, once a week, okay.
Almost every Friday, sometimes like three times a month.
Okay, right. Well, the fact that the first thing I was going to say is you're going to increase the frequency of when you're doing it, but I had mistaken for how often you were doing it.
Does that seem okay?
Yeah, for sure. Well, what I would say is those sessions should start to turn into more of a training session than a test session. And rather as a retest to see how is the mile holding or improving week by week, start to change up the distance at which you're running those intervals. So I'd imagine you're doing a real great warm-up, and then a good hard mile and a good cool down to protect the legs and recovery.
Yeah.
I would change that working set into multiple repeats of different distances.
Okay.
Probably accumulating no more than 2 or 3 miles of intensity.
So lower the intensity but do more reps there. So instead of pushing it for a PR every single time, it's okay if you hit a 7-minute mile or...
Yeah, for sure not pushing for the PR, but I wouldn't even necessarily always think it's going to be slower because you'll be doing some shorter distances.
Okay.
I'd be thinking like lots of 400s, 800s and kilometer reps. And the variety of those distances will mean different paces. But what we'll talk about in a moment will be how, while your heart responded very normally to the test, it could respond much more efficiently to the test. And that kind of mix of intensities and paces for those higher intensity periods, your 400 meter up as far as about a mile or so, is what you want to become efficient on. You were really, really good at the top. Your maximum scores were awesome. Your resting start stuff was really efficient as well. But that kind of in between when we went from walking to high intensity is what you need to work on. So a little bit of training at each of those different midpoint intensities.
Got it.
We've just got everything, by the way. I'm going to call it quits up top here. We'll get you off the treadmill. as far as testing goes, that's our afternoon.
Awesome.
That is testing complete. Good job.
All right.
Feeling fine after that?
Yeah,
Feeling more or less 100%.
I'm pleasantly surprised about the VO2 Max, but I'm really happy to improve that over time. But it's good to know that it's not as abysmal. I thought it was going to be very, very
No.
bad, but I guess, you know, it's hard to gauge.
No, it's funny enough actually, we talked about some reference ranges beforehand and how once you get as far as in your age category, guys in their 30s, once you get as far as a score of about 55 or 56, you're kind of like top of the class. Beyond that is the point at which you would then, at least in my opinion, start to consider yourself against the athletic populations. You've kind of, once you've got that far, there's no need for you to continue to improve it if your goal is longevity and wellness.
Right.
But if you haven't, in your case, of course you do,
advanced to the
you
next
have events.
level, right?
Well, you have an event you want to compete in, you have a particular performance goal. So given your score doesn't need to change from a health perspective, the training you're going to do and continue to do should be improving that score. All that is to say, you were at 56.1. Your score is at the top end of that range for what we would consider for good health and longevity, the 97th percentile for men within your age population. So that would mean if you could just sustain these numbers, it's going to be flipping fantastic for your great health. But we know you've got a competitive event coming up. We know you're going to be training, so this should be improving.
What would a good goal be for next time, like, you know, late June?
Timeline, what are we at now? Early April. So we got all of April, May, and some of June. Let's just say we have 3 months. We've got 12 weeks. Somewhere in the region of 62 to 65 would be an exceptional outcome. Anything in the 60s at all is what I'd be thinking. That's what I'd be hoping for.
All right, sounds good.
You want to have a sit down for a couple of minutes and let me dig into this a bit and do some math, and we'll be able to give you kind of a closer target. Oh yeah, for sure. Yeah, let's take a couple of minutes to get a coffee if you wanted, or a snack break.
Yeah, that's Jeremy's favorite part of finishing the day.
Here, pop this off me, Victor.
Yeah, good call, Sarah.
Yeah.
Pause there for 5 minutes. I'll wipe this down. How'd you feel that went?
That
What'd
was
you think?
a lot of fun.
Yeah.
I'm very happy with my baseline performance, but I'm hungry for more.
Yeah, let's talk about results. What we've got is, as we've already kind of in a small extent discussed, some really great numbers. There's always room for improvement, so we'll talk about exactly that. What I've got up first here is your grip strength scores. We'd already had a brief glance at these, but we had a bit of a funny reaction when we got to the end, and we had a bit of a higher score on your left and your right side. So we re-recorded the right side just to see did we improve it, and we did. So what we've ended up with for grip squeeze when we look at results is a 788 peak force on our left side, that's measured in newtons, and an 818 peak force in newtons on our right side. So 30 newtons more. We'd expect that someone would be a little bit stronger on their dominant side, but in your case, there's only a 0.5% of a difference between your left and right sides.
It's very interesting.
It's ideal. It is interesting for sure because it's always going to be influenced by things like, it always sounds silly when I say this to people, but what hand you open a door with, what hand you pick up your bag with when you leave the house, how you open your car door and things like that.
I always force myself to hold the grocery bag, the heavier grocery bag with my
The
offhand.
non-dominant?
I do that, yeah.
Well, that's why you've ended up with what is such a good asymmetry, because we're always going to tend to go to our dominant, and for the most part, this always sounds silly too, but the world is built for right-handed people. I'm a left-hander myself. At home, we've got a word for it, it's a kitog.
A kitog.
A kitog. I don't know what it translates to other than lefty, but we kitogs suffer. Doors open to the right side, handlebars for stair rails on the right side. You know? But what we noticed across the board with some of your jumps we'll talk about in a minute was the legs are also super symmetrical. So the strength training is very effective in your case. It's keeping you well balanced.
Good.
I would imagine it's because the nature of your age, your training history is what I mean really. You've been in the gym for a long, long time.
Yeah.
Another test we did when it comes to strength and power is what's called an isometric mid-thigh pull. So this is when you were pulling from the waist and the hips really, with a bit of an emphasis or a small emphasis on your hand grip strength. Again, you're holding on to that bar. What we were looking at here in regards to force scoring was about the 77 or 78th percentile, which is awesome given that this was also somewhat of a new exercise to you. Yes, it was somewhat like a deadlift, an exercise you regularly train, but the actual test performance is quite different. You know, you're stuck over here with a chain limiting how much of an angle you can create at your hips. You can't actually stand up straight. There is no getting out of that half squatted position. Phenomenal stuff. All I really have to say on this. Our time to peak force, there is a lesser emphasis on it because, well, we're pulling a greater force, it's going to take longer to generate, but still at only 1.25, 1.25 seconds to generate almost 3,000 newtons of force. And in our rate of force development, similar to that first 100 milliseconds we saw on the hands, really, really impressive again. Just shy of the 16,000 newtons per second mark. There's no need for any of this to change, but again, given the relevance of your upcoming training, I'd love to see this just rising towards 3,000, stay in the lowly ones, maybe 16s for that rate of force development score. But we're doing quite well there. The other thing that was not quite the same in terms of performance, but was very much related to your power in your legs was your jump height. We did a counter movement jump assessment. We had a peak height of 37.9 inches, which is 2 inches below another reference marker you had, a meter jump at just shy of 40 inches. Now, there's always going to be a case-by-case difference in scoring because we have different pieces of equipment, different monitors, and different ways of measuring metrics. But what we averaged out to was a 37.9-inch jump, and that was for 9 reps. On what is very much a power-based performance. It's very impressive to see. And we talked about muscular endurance in your VO2 Max. We'll talk about that in a moment. But what it seems you struggle with most in muscular endurance is just the particular sport. Muscularly, you had lots of endurance when it came to your jumping performance.
Yeah, because I've repped that more than almost anybody, I think, in existence.
I would hope so, given your outcomes. And if you haven't, fair play, your return on investment for lesser training than some, but higher reps or higher jumps has been great.
So when it comes to like a sled push, though, it's something I'm unfamiliar with. Maybe it's because I fatigue a lot faster on that because I'm just not used to incorporating maybe that much glute, that angle of the knee and the hip joint.
Yeah, and it's also the timing thing. You mentioned like a sled push. You're going to be, I mean, if it's 20, 25 yards, you're going to be doing multiple strides, multiple seconds.
It's just a one rep and then rest.
Yeah, and we saw something quite similar in your VO2 Max test in that you had a very, very good score throughout the walking stage at the beginning when we were just trying to keep things controlled. You had a very, very high point at the very end when we're looking for maximal. But the in-between, where we're testing to see like how efficient or how economical with their performance is somebody, is not in a bad position, but relative to what your maximum score is, it can definitely improve.
All right, cool, the mid-range. That makes sense because that's probably what I practice the least.
So this right here is your VO2 Max scoring, 9.5 miles per hour. We went to a little bit of percentage incline for that final moment to just test and see if we found anything. And we didn't find anything. What we did get was a 56.1 VO2 Max score. So congratulations, you're at the 97th percentile of your age population. You're smashing it compared to other guys in their 30s. And you're at the point at which, for future reference, now that we know where you're scoring, we're going to compare you against a more athletic population. What you're scoring here, say percentile-wise, is a Gen Pop score, yes. Final thing we've got is our shape scale. The first test we did, the last bit of stats we'll look at for the evening, and this is the body comp scan we did at the beginning. Really great stuff. There's a score on here to begin with your shape score, and this is not unimportant, but it's not the biggest thing we'll go into depth on. What it is it takes different body comp metrics and it weighs them differently towards what would be a 100% score for the so-called perfect aesthetic body. You've got a 95, you're doing pretty damn well. What it's weighing is your leanness, how much muscle mass you have on your upper body, your lower body, and then the balance or the symmetry between those to show that you're dispersing your muscle very evenly. And in your case, you've got a little bit more of a dispersion towards your lower body. And we know why.
It makes sense.
So while it's not a negative thing, the context matters here, which is where I'd say, although it's not a 100, it's a 95. It's an impressive score. That's an A+, I think, when it comes to grading. But it's not a score I would think is a matter we need to get hung up on, because with the nature of your sport being power-based for your lower body, you're going to have a bit of discrepancy towards your lower side. If you were a guy who was under-muscled, both upper and body, then I'd be concerned about the fact that you have more maybe in one region, or not maybe more in one region, but less in the other region. For someone who's like super packed full of muscle, then it's kind of, where is it important to have it?
Right.
So let's talk a little bit about that. You've come in at just over 170, something we already knew, scale weight. 10.5% body fat. Have you ever had any body composition measures done before?
A while ago, yeah. I think it was 6.5 on the football team, like a long time
Calipers?
ago. No, it was a bod pod.
Oh, okay, right, not a bad one then, yeah.
Yeah.
They're often
that was when I was
a little bit of an undershoot, but you were maybe teenager years.
Yeah, I was like 18.
Okay, yeah, not to knock you, but probably a little easier to get a better
20.
score on some of those. And also, again, like we discussed earlier, different pieces of equipment, different metrics, and ultimately what is an estimate versus like a gold standard, say DEXA, will always come up within a margin.
True, 10% body fat. Okay,
yeah, but 10%, whether it's this or even as an estimate, this is fantastic. A couple of particularly impressive things on here are your athletic lean mass ranges. This is how much lean mass you have in your arms and your legs, because our lean mass is a combo of organ weight as well as muscle mass. A lot of organs in the torso and trunk, and while we would hope, because of no maybe untoward reasons, those organs don't change in between someone's scans or check-ins, there is a reasonable thought that, you know, your stomach could be the slightest bit bigger or smaller, your kidneys could be active or inactive, and things can change there. It may only be grams, but there will be an influence. Your appendicular lean mass is how much lean mass you have in your arms and your legs, where there is skin, but there is no other organs. There's no major organs that are large and chunky in size. So muscle mass gained or lost will influence this score, and right now you're in what is considered to be an ideal category. You've got over 75, almost 76 pounds between your arms and your legs, comboed. And that gives us a lean mass index of 21.3. This is the BMI of your muscle tissue, because it is the lean mass in your arms and legs divided by your height. So it's the same calculation as BMI, it's a mass divided by a weight, but it's just not your full body mass.
Right.
In your case, you've come in at 21.3. You'll see here our standard charts, a little bit different scoring for BMI. 18 to 25 is what our healthy BMI score would be. You were at a 25, which is kind of like the perfect BMI. and you're in that athletic 20 to 22 range, you're in a really good position for the lean mass you have, and it's because you've got a very healthy BMI and a very low fat mass.
Makes sense.
You know, a lot of these metrics are, not a lot of them, all of them are earned in that, you know, if any result here is poor, it's because of the work you haven't done. When you get really good results, it's because of the work you have put in. So everything should kind of line up the way it has, in that when your, you know, overall fat mass is low, everything else is most likely going to come up pretty great, because you don't get that fat mass low by accident. A couple of particularly impressive things with the fat mass is the scoring for your visceral fat mass. Anything less than a pound here is considered to be great. So to be at a half a pound is excellent. It's very ideal, because there will always be little flows and ebbs, little fluctuations in this based off of seasonal dietary changes. I know I enjoy a drink at Christmas more than, you know, the rest of the year, that kind of thing. But again, this leaves you wiggle room. If you were to say, be like me and have a beer more than you would on a Sunday night at Christmas,
it's going
to go to 0.55. We're going to be laughing, because it's still going to be really healthy.
Right.
So that's what I'd say off of all of this is, from a body composition standalone point, if you were checking yourself for body compositional needs and you weren't already where you are athletically, then something like this might be a scan you could do every 3 or 6 months to see that as you're training, you're moving the needle along.
Right.
Nothing on here needs to change. So as long as you can see the aesthetic holding, I would, from my own personal perspective, be testing this again, because I'd be interested in seeing how I work and what it means, you know, what changes when I train. But if all of your training equated to nothing really changing on here, no one will be too concerned about that. It's in a really great position. Not all these numbers are of massive importance in that BMR, basal metabolic rate, how many calories you'll need in a day for sustenance of just what you've got. But before you do any activity, so you're just alive and well, you're laying in bed and existing, totally happy, but that's all you're doing for the day. So 1,800 calories is what we'll call it, will keep you alive, so to speak. I would suggest a few more than that. I'm sure you're getting out of bed, you're a busy man. I can imagine you're at 20,000 steps a guy a day.
Yeah, I get a lot of calories and a lot more than that.
Health score, similarly to our, what are you looking at? Probably 4,000 or 5,000 range on heavy training days? I'm not surprised.
Yeah, probably every day.
Yeah, oh wow. I guess given the nature of your work as well as your training days and then your training days are going to be more than average.
And I'm training clients, I'm lugging equipment out.
This health score, similar to that shape score at the beginning, weighted percentages for different categories we've looked at. So visceral fat mass is the heaviest weighted one, body fat, functional muscle, and overall age weighted here. 100 out of 100 score for health. So for a guy in his 30s, you're scoring what is considered the kind of the best case scenario scores you can get on here.
Awesome.
And the last thing I would look at, what I'm expecting, is good symmetries. Yeah. What I'd check out on here in regards to symmetries would be that everything is within a half an inch for like good maintenance. Left to right side dominance is going to show up on the dominant side more often than not. So if there is a discrepancy, we'd expect it there. But in your case with the legs, same size calves, 14.8 inches. The mid thigh point, 22.9, so we're good. And peculiarly enough, actually, your left arm is the most marginal amount, 0.3 of an inch larger than your right arm at the central bicep. That can be down to a handful of random things. Sometimes it's just how you're holding water. I'm sure you're taking creatine, and we don't get to really control where the water storage or the glycogen goes. That's probably all that is, given that everything else is so symmetrical.
Interesting.
And if you weren't sure on your suit size, 42 jacket. Probably
that is accurate.
Probably a regular.
I was 40 or 42, I can't remember. That's pretty accurate.
That's all I have for you on this one, Chris, and that's all I have for you, full stop. Have you any questions on anything? Any of the results you wanted to go back over again, or any thoughts you've had on the day?
No, I thoroughly enjoyed this.
Great, I'm glad. If I was to give you a big overall summary, you're obviously in fantastic shape. We kind of knew a little bit about that beforehand, so we weren't testing today to find what we need to fix. We were testing today to find out what can we optimize. And I think the biggest takeaway can be optimization of those cardio zones, optimization of how your heart rate moves when you begin exercise and maintain an intensity, as opposed to what we know you're fantastic at, the very high intensity and then the recovery in between sets, so you can maintain that high intensity. Right. I think that's probably the best thing for you to be working on. Other than that, every metric we recorded, we will want to see improve to an extent, but I wouldn't be super concerned on saying you need to perform better by X% or improve to Y%. We'll just want to see that because we know you're training, metrics are moving in the right direction.
Let's just get better. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, that's about it. Any questions, any thoughts from me or on that?
No, it's very, very helpful to know about the middle zones, for cardio and getting that zone 2 and trying to get that heart rate to not spike and do that later. So that's going to be helpful towards the competition and the events that I'm going to be needing. So I can't wait to work on it, and thank you very much.
Yes. Thanks for hanging out, man. It was a blast.
Absolutely.
Best of luck in July.
Yes, July and August.
I'm looking forward to hearing all about it, seeing it as well when we get it on the screens.
Stay tuned. And everybody, hit the like button, hit the subscribe button, and I'll catch you guys in the next one. Peace.